Hi guys, welcome back. It's so good to see you all, and hello to all the new subscribers. We're at 131. What? I don't even believe it. But anyway, let's go on to the most important part, which is Moinetta's diary, November. We have 2 more months of her. I'm gonna miss her. But let's just get into it. You know, why waste time? Let's do it. November 1, Sunday, dull and cold. We went to church in the morning and rode home with the O'Briens. Mrs. H up to supper. In the evening, we went to church with the Porters. The O'Briens brought us home. 7 of us. Okay. I think that says 7 of us. And I can't read that. Singer here. Good. Got what? Mrs. S had died. Oh, got word that Mrs. S had died. Oh. Ray got ride back to Sussex with the Sissons. We've said that before. I listened to Billy Graham at 10:30 from Detroit. Nice. All right, November 2nd. Dull. Then it rained. Simply poured. I love her. I went over to see the Duffys as Mrs. Duffy's father had passed. Oh, my goodness. I was invited to go over to Betty Chapman's in the evening to their group, but it rained and I didn't go because sugar melts. Hello. Sadie came up for the evening. Mrs. Fraser and Lillian went to high school to see a picture. It turned cold. They went with the Davises. Varna called and brought my check, $5, knitting book, cake, and cookies. Varna is the hero, let me tell you. Money, a craft book, cookies, and a cake. Excellent. November 3rd, dull. Sun came out for a while. Mrs. Fraser went to Louisville to see Mrs. Philman. I went to Vaughn's and did some shopping. Sadie up in the afternoon for a while, getting ready for a masquerade. Ooh. I received a box of Christmas cards from Francis, 50 of them. November 4th is a Wednesday. Fine, windy, very cold. Mrs. Fraser had company for dinner. Mrs. Ryan and Mrs. L. Atkinson. I went over to Varna's at 11 a.m. and got apron stitched. She insisted I stay to dinner. After dinner, I went down to Mabel's and sorted a box of, maybe it's Burl's letter and book. Got home 4 p.m. Mrs. Fraser and women down to see Mrs. Iris Bell in for the evening. Verna not very well, stomach hurting her. Aw. Poor gal. November 5th, Thursday, cold and windy. Mrs. Fraser and I went to Mr. S.'s funeral at Tuttle's. Does it say big? Oh, big crowd. Something beautiful. I was going to say filmed, but that's maybe age? I don't know. What do you guys think? Family all came home. In the evening, Sadie was up for a while. I wrote to Francis and Mrs. Is it Carol? Something of us went to prayer meeting, very cold. Yeah, I imagine it's starting to get pretty bad there. November 6th, fine, beautiful and sunny. Finished Mrs. Fraser's 2 aprons, talked with Varna, talked with Mabel. Is it Sink? Must be. or tank. Tank in bathroom caused a leak about bedtime. Letter from Frances with check and snap of herself. Good. Oh, I wish we could see that picture. Aww. And of course, the bathroom has to have a little leak in it right at bedtime, because that's the way it goes. Ooh, look at the 7th. Ooh, I hope I can read these. It looks... Oh, okay. November 7th. Cold and windy. Mrs. Fraser and Phil went downtown. Mrs. Fraser called plumber? But don't you think P-L-U-M... It looks like plumber. And he found a good washer in town over something caused the leak, and he ruptured it. Oh, he found a bad washer. Okay. What did I say? Did I say he found a good washer? That's not what I read. Mrs. Fraser called plumber, and he found a bad washer in tank over something caused the leak, and he repaired it. Wow, I slipped into an alternate universe there. All right, while getting my breakfast, I set a pail in the doorway of pantry to get a few drops. Oh no. I fell over the pail flat in pantry floor. I hurt my leg and... Oh, I don't know what this says. Could scarcely get up. My something cereal but did not break. Underline. Oh no. Poor gal. Oh. Was down to store this afternoon. Okay, so she just goes on. She hurt her leg. Oh, does that say and pride? Or pizza? I'm sure it's not pizza. Maybe it's pride or finger. You guys, is it pride, finger, or pizza? Could scarcely get up. My something cereal flew but did not break. Aww. I'm getting a mental image. I've fallen multiple times, and once holding some dog poo that had happened accidentally indoors, and I was going over the dog gate to go dispose of it. Totally fell right over it. Dropped the specimens, and it was embarrassing. So I totally get it. All right, TMI, I know. Okay. Raining. So she went down to the store this afternoon. Raining. The Davises are taking us to Youth for Christ. Billy Graham picture something is very something. Well, we want to see this with Mr. and Mrs. Davis. We were glad to get a ride, both as it was raining a pour. Picture was wonderful. I'm not sure what that says. I'll have to look that up and put it here if I find it. Is that Oilton? Quilton? Not Quilton. I'm not sure. But she thought it was wonderful. All right, November 8th. Rainy. Warmer than the night before. I got ride to church with Mrs. Long and Mr. and Mrs. Lane. Came home with Mr. and Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Fraser did not go. In evening, we went again to church. I listened to Billy Graham last night in Detroit. There 5 weeks. 10:30. Mr. or Mrs. Colbone passed away in the morning, 95 years old. Aw, what were the names of the other people? Remember, there were 2 other people that passed, like, within days of each other. Hold on, I gotta look at that. What do you guys think? I thought it was a C, right? November 9th, fine. In the morning, I walked up to get some stamps on St. George Street and went in to see Mrs. Miller. Did not get home until 12:15. Holy moly! Mrs. Miller gave me 2 jars, something cake, cookies, does that say brownies? And another kind. That was nice of her. Mrs. Fraser went over to see Mr. something in the afternoon, and I ironed for her. Mrs. Fraser ordered pans? Ordered pans to Woodstock, Ontario? Maybe not Woodstock. In the evening, Lillian went to a shower. This is like the 4th shower that Lillian's gone to this year. All right, November 10th, fine and very sunny. I went over to to see Mabel, Stone, Marion, as they are leaving for home this week. 7 of them stopping at Ottawa. Mrs. Duffy going on to Pennsylvania with Mabel. Then Frank Stone took me down to Eaton's. Mr. Duffy went too. Met Mrs. something down there. We went into, it might be Woolworth's, and she paid for us tea and pumpkin pie, then came home. She went on to so-and-so. Mrs. Fraser went to Mr. so-and-so's funeral. I washed my, I don't know. Ray came home. So if you don't know Woolworth's, I remember Woolworth's when I was young, and it had like a lunch counter, and you could get like diner food in there and then shop as well. And it was sort of like things like in Kmart and like the Dollar Tree and things like that, but really good prices. All right, November 11th. Fine, sunny in the morning, then got cloudy. Mrs. Fraser and Lillian went to the parade. I stayed home and listened over the radio to it. Holiday for Lily. I think she meant to write, unless that was her nickname, Lilia. Varna phoned me. Ray went back to Minto at night. Lillian went up to high school to see Billy Graham's picture. Looks like snow. Remembrance Day. I was going to say, I wonder what the parade was for. So I'll put that up here about what Remembrance Day was. And in Canada, maybe it has to do with the war, like World War, all the world wars, 1 and 2. November 12th, fine, just a little dull. At 1 p.m. I went over to Mabel's to something over my boxes, in parentheses, books and dishes. Varna down to Mabel's a little while, took home some of my dishes. She got me a cup tea and date bread. I got home at 4:30. November 13th, fine. Mrs. Fraser went downtown in the afternoon, and I went down to store for groceries. In the evening, we went to our group at Mrs. Eagle's. Good meeting. Lillian had to go back to work. I thought Lillian was a child. What? I'm so confused. C Street is 11. years today since Frank left us. Oh, not C Street. It is 11 years today since Frank left us. Oh. Mrs. Fraser got her hair done at hairdressers. I wonder who Frank was. All right, November 14th. Beautiful fine morning. Mrs. Fraser went up to St. George Street shopping. Sick with rheumatism rest of day. Wow. Lillian, Sadie, and... Oh, maybe I'm thinking of Sadie as the child. Yes, because Lillian is the one that... Yes, sorry. Sadie is the child. Lillian, Sadie, and I went to Youth for Christ in Heightfield. Big crowd. Something mostly of... consisted mostly of music. Something from Sunnybray? Oh, band. Band from Surrey. Quintet of girls from Bible school, quartets, duets, subs, etc. Reading by Mrs. Fletcher. And then I think that says snow in parentheses. Okay. November 15th. Fine in the morning. At noon, it began to rain. Mrs. Fraser not able to go to church. Lillian and I went. Got right home with Mr. Porter. Wonderful sermon on... I can't read what that says. Mrs. Carroll able to be back to church. Sam something Hannah there. Rainey did not go in the evening. All right. We are on a Monday, November 16th. Rainy, some, then very dull. Mrs. Fraser washed, feeling a little better. In the morning, I went up to something, etc. Walked both ways. Note from Mrs. Carroll. We are buzzing along, guys. The 17th. Tuesday is busy. All right. Dull. There had squall, snow. I went over to Verna's to stitch. Found no one home. Sat in Mabel's porch 20 to 25 minutes waiting for Verna to come home. Mabel in front of house and didn't hear me. Yes. I love it. Sounds like something I would do. All right. So she was just waiting on the porch for 20-25 minutes, and Mabel was in the front and didn't hear her. Varna had been to hospital having neck operated on. Cyst, abscess, and extraction. Okay. Doctor thinks 'twill be okay. I stayed to dinner. Let Verna rest until after 2. Then Mrs. K came to make decorations for candles for sale and supper at... Varma got up to help. You can't keep Varma down, let me tell you. Varma, she's the one that had her cyst, abscess, and extraction. Now we watch Dr. Pimple Popper, and it's like in office, no big deal. All right. Letter. Oh, I came home. Letter from Ben. Got the suit. Mrs. Fraser suffering with rheumatism. 26 years today since Varma was married. Lillian had to go back to work. So that sort of gives us a possible age for Varna, or Verna. I can't tell if that's an E or an A, but one of the girls, So she was married 26. I can't do math right now, but let's just say she got married when she was 18. So I will put it right here somewhere. How old she could possibly be. And don't mind this, is just part of my filming studio. All right, November 18th. Fine, beautiful day. Verna down to doctor's office twice today to have neck dressed. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because nowadays you would just do it at home. Vara took her. Lillian went to group at Brunswick Hotel. Package stamps from Mrs. Snell. Letter from Mrs. Nudd. Yeah, that's something, back in 1953, you would have to go to the doctor twice in one day to have the neck dress. That's interesting. All right, November 19th. Another beautiful day. I went downtown, saw many friends. Mrs. Fraser still sick. Got lunch at Woolworth's. Home at 2 p.m. Sadie in a few minutes in the morning. Letter from Francis with $1 in it. Lillian had to go back to work. So, what was I just going to say? Oh, you guys. So Mrs. Fraser, through this entire time we've been reading the diary, is often sick. And I was we were wondering what ails her. So now we know she has rheumatism, which I'll put a basic information in here in case nobody knows what it is. So, all right, November 20th is a Friday. Fine and warm. Mrs. Fraser feeling a little better. Sadie up for evening. Verna down to doctor's to have neck dressed. Ray got ride home. Sent Francis a letter. Very nice. All right, I'm going to have a little water break, guys. Not water, because if that's water, that's scary. It's tea. Okay. You guys are like, what kind of water's coming out of your tap? Not brown water.